Have you ever felt totally boxed in by what people expect of you? Well, let's dive right into this explainer and look at how one artist handled that exact pressure on a massive global scale. We're going to look at how Bob Dylan morphed from an acoustic folk prophet into a surrealist rock pioneer. It's a wild story of shifting identities, rapidly changing times, and literally reimagining what popular music could actually be.
The line it is drawn, the curse it is cast, the slowest now will later be fast. You probably recognize that one, right? It's that iconic, provocative lyric from the times they are a-changing. Back in the early 60s, Dylan used his music to predict a world that was turning completely upside down. But here's the crazy part. Right after warning everybody that the world was changing, Dylan went ahead and totally flipped his own musical world upside down, basically defying every single expectation his audience had built up for him.
Part 1. The Acoustic Prophet. So to really get this massive shift, we've got to ground ourselves in his early phase, roughly 1962 to 1964. During this stretch, Dylan cultivated this image of a sober, pragmatic son of the soil. He was writing these scathing, pithy, finger-pointing songs. And sociologist Todd Gitlin makes this brilliant observation about Dylan's persona. He says Dylan debuted broodingly old. Think about that. Even in his early 20s, he possessed this incredible lyrical darkness and the aura of an older, wiser oracle. And because he started out feeling so ancient and weathered, it actually let him grow old in public, ironically enough. He could perform those classic songs decades later for his original fans' grandkids, without surrendering a thing or looking like a washed-up caricature.
Now, during this acoustic phase, Dylan's work was deeply rooted in what's called the Jeremiad. Basically, that's a prolonged lamentation or a prophecy of downfall and cleansing. Drawing heavily on Puritan and biblical imagery, early Dylan often acted almost like an Old Testament prophet. He was out there uttering these dire warnings against warmongers and the powerful elite in what he saw as a crumbling nation, predicting that a hard reign of apocalyptic cleansing was inevitably going to fall.
Part 2. Mapping a Crumbling Nation. You see, Dylan actively mapped out this crumbling nation, using highly specific geography to trace the fault lines of the American ethos. Take a look at this contrast. The highway represented horizontal movement. It meant dynamic activism, the thrill of motion, and a liberating, if a little dangerous, escape from stagnation. But then you have the skyscraper, which symbolized rigid class hierarchy, drab commerciality, and just inevitable failure. So the highway was your way out, while the skyscraper was a trap where you could really only tumble down into nothingness.
Part 3. The Electric Pivot. And Dylan? Well, he didn't want to stay trapped either, not even by his own massive success. As we hit 1964, he's getting pretty tired of the whole politics on the sleeve vibe of the protest movement, not to mention all the internal bickering among folk purists. Just look at this timeline. It shows the absolute breakneck speed of his artistic evolution. Summer of '64, he's up in Woodstock, banging away on his typewriter for hours, and his lyrics are getting way more surreal. Then, August rolls around and he meets the Beatles in New York. That meeting basically poured gasoline on his craving for a rock sound. Fast forward to December, he's in the studio with producer Tom Wilson, experimenting with putting a Fats Domino-style electric rock backing over his acoustic tracks. And boom, by January 1965, he's fully in the studio to record an electric masterpiece.
Part 4. Bringing it all back home.
That masterpiece was the monumental 1965 album, Bringing It All Back Home. This is the exact moment Dylan just exploded the boundaries of both folk and rock music, which, by the way, deeply divided the folk scene at the time. To really grasp the lightning-in-a-bottle genius of this record, wrap your head around this staggering number, 3.5 hours. On January 14, 1965, Dylan walked into Columbia Studio A with an electric band. There was virtually no rehearsal. Guitarist Bruce Langhorne said it was amazingly intuitive. So, in just 3.5 hours, literally from 2:30 to 6 p.m., they laid down the master electric takes of multiple legendary tracks. Just an absolute rapid-fire outpouring of creativity. The album itself is this perfect snapshot of a changing era, and it's literally split right down the middle. As you can see, side 1 is driven by an electric band. It's inspired by the driving beat of Chuck Berry and has this incredibly acerbic rock tone. But then, side 2 is entirely different. It's mostly acoustic solo work, heavily inspired by surrealist poets like Arthur Rimbaud, and packed with complex stream-of-consciousness lyrics.
Let's drop the needle on side 1, The Electric Rebellion. When you listen to tracks like Subterranean Homesick Blues and Maggie's Farm, you hear Dylan injecting wild surrealism straight into traditional blues structures. He wasn't just playing rock and roll, you know? He was using it to mock the system and societal expectations.
Take Maggie's Farm, where he sings about waking up with a head full of ideas driving him insane. That is a loud, clear declaration that he absolutely refuses to conform to what the folk establishment, or anyone else for that matter, wanted him to be.
Then we flip the record over to side 2, the acoustic surrealism. Now, even though he goes back to his familiar acoustic guitar and harmonica here, he's totally done with traditional protest songs. Instead, he delivers what biographers call grim masterpieces, like It's All Right Ma, I'm Only Bleeding. The lyrics here are dreamlike, surreal, and incredibly introspective. He's no longer pointing fingers at politicians, he's diving deep into the chaotic, magical, and sometimes super bleak landscape of the human mind.
And we have to talk about the album cover itself, shot by Daniel Kramer. It was a massive visual announcement that Dylan's world was now upside down, a true bohemian mundus inversus. The edge-softened lens captures Dylan looking straight at us, holding his cat, and just surrounded by all these surrealist artifacts. You've got Sally Grossman lounging in the background in this striking red outfit, Lotta Yenya and Robert Johnson records scattered around, a Time magazine featuring Lyndon B. Johnson, and right there on the mantle, a literal fallout shelter sign. Because hey, nothing says casual bohemian lounging quite like preparing for a nuclear winter, right? It was this meticulously crafted image of elegant disorder.
Part 5. A New Musical Landscape.
When this album dropped in April 1965, Dylan didn't just change his own career trajectory, he literally sparked the entire folk rock genre, directly inspiring bands like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Simon & Garfunkel to bring deep, introspective lyrics into the mainstream. He created a totally new kind of rock and roll. Music critic Dave Marsh really hit the nail on the head when he said by fusing the Chuck Berry beat with the leftist folk tradition, Dylan really had brought it back home. He proved, once and for all, that rock music could be intellectually rigorous and that folk music could be loud, chaotic, and fiercely individualistic.
Which brings us to this final, really provocative thought. When Dylan stepped onto that stage with an electric guitar, effectively turning his back on the acoustic protest movement that made him famous, the folk purists actually booed him. They called him a traitor. But looking back now at the sheer literary genius and the musical revolution that was bringing it all back home, we really have to ask ourselves, did Bob Dylan abandon his generation, or did he simply invent a completely new, profound way to speak to them? Thanks so much for exploring this massive musical pivot with me on today's Explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the music you listen to.